President Hoover, Mr. Chief Justice, my friends, this is a day of national consecration. And I am certain that on this day, my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance. In every dark hour of our national life, a leadership of frankness and of vigor has met with that understanding and support of the people themselves, which is essential to victory.
You know, there are some speeches that I absolutely, entirely love, and I can listen to over and over again. James Baldwin, for example, I'm Going to the Moon by John F. Kennedy. And this speech, this was FDR's inaugural speech, 1933. He's in the middle of the Great Depression. He gets in office, and it is understood that measures need to be taken place in order to ameliorate the harsh concerns of the public. And when FDR gets in office, he does just that. In the first 100 days, he signed the Tennessee Valley Authority Act in law, creating TVA and enabling the federal government to build dams along the Tennessee Valley that controlled flooding and generated inexpensive hydroelectricity for the people. In June's National Industry Recovery Act guaranteed that workers would have the right to unionize and bargain collectively for higher wages and better working conditions. It also suspended some antitrust laws and established federally funded Public Works Administration. In addition, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the Tennessee Valley Authority Act, and the National Industrial Act, Roosevelt had won the passage of 12 other major laws, including Glass-Steagall Homeowners Loan Act. This was in the first 100 days of office. Later, in the second New Deal, he passed Social Security, again, trying to put money into the hands of workers, and Works Public Administration to provide jobs for unemployed people. Now, this didn't compete with private enterprise, but at the very least, they were building things like post offices and basically things that private enterprise didn't care about. Again, the main point and objective was to put money into people's hands to make sure those people had jobs. The point here is that FDR took expansive and immediate action, whether you loved him or hated him. Clearly, they loved him because he got elected 4 times. I'm just making the point that in the Great Depression, FDR was very clear on his perspective. He was very clear on the people that he wanted to back and support in dealing with this issue. A few years later, FDR, who is at this point considered a traitor to his class, comes out and gives one of the most thunderous, potentially badass, no fucks to give speeches that I think I have ever heard a president.
For nearly 4 years now, you have had an administration which, instead of twirling its thumbs, has rolled up its sleeves. And I can assure you that we will keep our sleeves rolled up. We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
That's a man who's very clear on who his enemies are, who he is fighting for, and what he is up against. They are unanimous in their hatred for me, and I welcome their hatred. I am very clear on who my enemies are. FDR took action as if we were being invaded by a foreign country and dealing with the New Deal. So when Nancy Pelosi and Democrats come out and make the point that says, this is going to be an FDR type deal, this is Rooseveltian in scale, they say, they scream, they imply explicitly. I guess it's not implying if it's explicit. Heroes Act. Now, let's be very clear. They passed 4 bills prior. They passed 4 Republican bills prior that didn't deal with these quote unquote heroes. Tens of millions of people had lost their job, and they just passed one Republican plan after the next, giving all of this money to this organized mob, as FDR would say. The Democratic Party is planning a $3 trillion bill, a vote that's supposed to take place. Now, I made a point that this bill is just a showpiece, basically a unicorn. They understood that the Republican Party had basically been running the ball, and they gave over everything to the Republican Party, just sitting there letting Trump hang himself. By the same token, they still needed to show something, that they were doing something, that they weren't just wasting their time. So Nancy Pelosi, who basically had almost unanimous control, pushes out this $3 trillion bill. Democrats acknowledge that the behemoth proposal, whose summary alone is 90 pages, is more of a talking point than legislation that they expect to become law. I told you that when this first came out, that this was basically a unicorn. They had no chance of getting this bill passed. They lost all leverage in trying to get any bill like this passed, considering they gave Republicans everything that they wanted. The Democratic Party and this $3 trillion plan is not an FDR plan. This plan is a giveaway to insurance companies, and it's a giveaway to lobbyists, instead of dealing with the human concerns of the public itself. We literally have a situation where 70% of the population, the majority, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, are on board for Medicare for all. And yet, the Democratic Party still could not bring itself to deal with Medicare for all, or for that matter, Medicare for everybody with coronavirus. Instead, it's going to give a bunch of subsidies to insurance companies for COBRA benefits. Is this really an FDR plan? Or are they just, once again, stealing the name? Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. I like to say this content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate the opportunity for you allowing me to do it. Here's the catch. It's not that everything in this bill is bad. There are some things in this bill that are actually quite good. What's overt and explicitly missing, however, are the priorities of lefties. In fact, those things were explicitly left out the bill. Just to be very clear, this bill is only a showpiece with no potential to get enforced or to get passed. And despite this bill being just a showpiece, Nancy Pelosi made certain that progressive priorities were not allowed in this bill. For example, it doesn't contain recurring cash payments, payment check guarantee, cancellation of rent and mortgage payments, expansion of Medicare to cover the rapidly growing number of people who are unemployed and uninsured. Our jobs, our healthcare is connected to our jobs. You have 33.5 million people without a job. You have a lot of other people who don't necessarily or have their wages cut. Well, how are those people going to get health care if they don't necessarily have a job? And the amount of money, personal experience, you have to pay for COBRA benefits when you don't have a job is obscene. The notion that the Democratic Party is more interested in ensuring the health and safety of health insurance companies as opposed to expanding Medicare to cover those people that have been infected with COVID-19. I would say Medicare for all, but at the very least, those people with COVID-19. I'm sorry, that's A, a waste of money. B, you're spending a ton of money just in order to prop up insurance companies as opposed to expanding Medicare that has a much less overhead. Pelosi, Democratic leadership, this is where they function. Meaning, if you want to know who they represent and what they represent, you're in the middle of a crisis. FDR, when he was dealing with that crisis, he tried to knock that shit to the moon. The Democratic Party is basically giving away money to lobbyists and insurance companies. And this is the bill they're calling Rooseveltian. When asked, why didn't you go further? Why didn't you include progressive priorities in this? I mean, the progressive priorities were things that the public needed, especially if you're having in the middle of a pandemic and people aren't able to go to work. Why didn't you deal with the main priorities of lefties and, for that matter, the population itself? Let's hear Clyburn give this answer.
Well, I like our bill myself. Paycheck guarantee is great. And I think doing it this way is an efficient way to do it. In fact, I think it's the most efficient way to do it. But we have to pay for all of these things. And when you're passing a bill trying to take care of state and local governments, that's primary with us. Trying to take care of those people that we named the bill after, the heroes, those essential workers, the people I just talked about. When you're trying to make sure that they're taken care of, then you look at the other things. And we just got to the point where the bill just got too big. Now, there are things in this bill.
Clyburn is basically saying we ran out of cash. We wanted to attend to the needs of those quote unquote heroes. Missing the point that those heroes are going to have to pay higher food costs. Those heroes still have to pay health insurance. And if you had Medicare for all, it would cut down on the amount of money they had to pay for their health insurance. They still had to pay for rents. Like, these are things that Jayapal was putting through in order to deal with people who, yes, were heroes, but also people who weren't quote unquote heroes, but people who were just unfortunate to be part of that 33.5 million to lose their jobs. The entire point of a paycheck protection program was to ensure those companies stay afloat. The entire point of ensuring that money went directly to human beings was to ensure that those people could still buy supplies and things that they needed to keep their, again, economy afloat. The entire point of trying to get rid of rents is because you understand that during a time period where 33.5 million people have lost their jobs, their ability to pay their rent may be difficult. Not to mention, the Democratic Party under this particular leadership gave 95% of the income gains to the top 1% under Obama. And for whatever reason, you don't necessarily see how giving that much money to the rich adversely affects the amount of money people have in their savings, in their checkings account, or their ability to make ends meet from point A to point B just during the course of their life. The majority of the population in this country live paycheck to paycheck. The majority of the population in this country didn't have $500 in the bank. And when you confront it with 33.5 million people that lost their jobs, and you correlate that before this hit, people were living paycheck to paycheck, or for that matter, people didn't have money in the bank. What situation and what condition do you think a large segment of this population is in? And again, when I make the point that we're not all dealing with this equally, this is kind of the point that I'm getting at. You have a bill that has no chance of passing. In having a bill that has no chance of passing, you explicitly took the interest of avoiding and leaving out progressive priorities that would have dealt with the hard edges of this particular pandemic. You didn't want to do that. And your argument is we ran out of cash. And that's with a $3 trillion bill on top of passing another $3 trillion bill that Republicans put out that basically was a giveaway to corporations. This is your Democratic Party. This is the party that is trying to compare themselves to Roosevelt. And what I would advise lefties, progressives that have found themselves in Congress is to vote this bill down. It does not have your priorities. It does not have the priorities of your particular constituencies that voted you in that office. And at some point, you need to stop going along to get along and start leveraging the power that you're supposed to have in that political space in order to get across what you accept and what you don't accept. And if this bill does not have Medicare for all associated with it when 70% of the population is on board, you should vote this down. I'll leave this here. Like, share, and subscribe.